This is Kent Fortner. I have the honor and pleasure of interviewing Mr. Jake Sloan, who I consider a friend. Jake, welcome.
Glad to be here.
And Jake and I are out here in one of the empty coal sheds on the waterfront of Mare Island. We got a little bit of boat noise in the background. We're trying to pause while the boats go by. It's not always easy, but it's a working waterfront, so I guess that's how it goes. Jake, I know you through two different avenues. One is in my role with the Mare Island Historic Park Foundation, which I've had the honor of being president of. You served on that board before I got there, and then you served on it briefly while I was there.
Right.
And I learned about your story and the 21ers in particular while I was there, which I just found fascinating. And then later we got together and collaborated with you to make a beer called the 21ers at the brewing company, which I'm, of course, along with Ryan and one of the founders of. And that was absolute hoot. So I want to get to that later. But I've always wanted to record your history. I think it's incredibly important. It's one of the most important stories I knew that is not often told. And so I love being a part of helping tell your story when we're out there. And you actually wrote a book about this. Title of the book, I'll let you share.
The title of the book is Standing Tall, Willie Long and the Original 21ers.
And that book is available on Amazon, right?
It's available on Amazon.
And you got a rewrite here recently, or a re-edit?
A re-edit.
A re-edit?
Yeah.
Okay, I read it in its original version, so I'm gonna have to go back and read it again. But so let's start out with a little background. Tell me about where you're from originally.
I'm originally from Arkansas. My family left there because of lack of economic opportunity. Where I was born and spent the early years of my life, you had two choices. When you grew up, you could be work in the woods as a lumberjack,
okay,
or be a sharecropper. And my father wasn't attractive to my father, so he came to California looking for economic opportunity. And then after a couple of years, the whole family came out, our family came, and then other parts of the family decided to leave and some went to Detroit, some went to Seattle, some came to the Bay Area.
And where in the Bay Area were you when you first got here?
Richmond,
not too far away. So tell me how you came to Mare Island. Like, what did you know about Mare Island? Did somebody suggest it to you? Was it a job posting? Like, how'd you end up on Mare Island?
Some of the members of my family, including my father and a couple of uncles, worked here. Not over a long period, but from time to time. I actually heard about it directly when I came from the Army. I was in the Army when I was very young.
Okay.
When I came out of the Army at the age of 19, I was thinking that maybe I would re-enlist and go back and make a career of the Army, but every time I thought about it, I thought about the winters in Germany. And I was afraid they'd send me back to Germany, and then I heard they were hiring here at Mare Island, and I came out and took the exam. Fortunately, I got 5 points for being a veteran, and with the 5 points, I passed.
Well, so you got 5 points for being a veteran, and you needed 5 points to pass.
70 was passing, and I made 73 with 5 points. So,
attaboy, Jake. Attaboy. And so the test was like, what was the test? It was an aptitude test, or what was it?
Basically mechanical aptitude, a little English, but basically mechanical aptitude. And I had worked in petroleum storage when I was in the Army. And you know, my family is kind of mechanical, so that wasn't very hard. And in high school, I didn't take many classes that were worth anything, but I took shop drawing or drafting, so I was able to read blueprints. So they said, well, we'll put you in the pipe fitter shop, which was really fortunate for me for the story that I would have to tell later on.
Right. And the pipe fitter shop, is that building 46?
Yes.
That's building 46, which is basically the oldest building on the island and the building that the museum housed up until recently.
Right.
All right, so you get a job with it. Tell me about, at the time, was the size of Mare Island, the influence of Mare Island? Did everybody know about Mare Island, or was it kind of sleepy and quiet by that point? This is the 60s, right? We're talking about?
I would say people in the Bay Area knew about Mare Island.
Okay.
A lot of people from all over the Bay Area worked here at Mare Island. I mean, probably the greatest part of the workforce was from Vallejo, but people came from San Francisco, Oakland, Richmond. A lot of the guys came from Richmond, where I grew up. So it was for unless you had, for working class people, it was a great place to work
Really?
in terms of stability. You got paid every week, decent pay. You worked every day, rain or shine. And if you were a veteran, you almost had to kill someone to get fired. So and for African Americans, it was really considered to be one of the best jobs you could get.
Really?
At the time.
Let's go into that a little bit. Tell me about, because I know race relations is a huge part of your life even to this day, and that's a huge part of the story we want to tell. Tell me what the race relations were like when you came on to the island. Did you feel welcome? Was it very segregated? What was the nature of the island? And what year are we talking? This is...
I came here in 1960.
1960, exactly. Right. So tell me what the kind of status of that was at the time.
At the time, the shops were in some cases segregated.
Segregated.
In other words, there were certain shops that African Americans would work in and certain that they didn't. And those where they didn't normally work, the number was very small. The machine shop, electrical shop, those shops, virtually no African Americans. But the laborers, painters, sandblasters, the non tech jobs, I would call them.
Okay.
Very few African Americans, except for Shop 56, where I worked, the pipe fitted shop.
Yeah.
Quite a few African Americans worked in there for some reason. I don't remember exactly what it was, but quite a few African Americans, relatively speaking, worked in Shop 56. The challenge was that there were probably 1,000 African Americans working on shipyard at that time.
Okay.
Over time, sometimes a lot more than that, but about 1,000. Of the 1,000, only 2 were supervisors.
Wow.
And those 2 works in what I call the non-production shops. There were, I think, 2, there were sandblasters or laborers. In some shops, there were no African American supervisors whatsoever. Most shops, the production shops, virtually no African American supervisors.
Wow. And do you know how many people were on the island working at the time? Was it a 10,000 person?
About 10,000.
So like 10% of the workforce is African American. And of the supervisors, we're talking barely a percentile, basically.
Oh, yeah. Not even 1%.
Did the different races keep to themselves socially?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Off the shipyard, there was virtually no socializing.
Okay. And what about, may not be something you know a lot about, but what about the Irish and the Italians or whatever? Did everybody stick to their own sort of cultural groups, or was it really a black and white situation?
It was kind of a black and white, but Filipinos were discriminated against. Asians were discriminated against. It was, the leadership of the island was white.
Yeah, clearly. All right, so let's get into the 21ers, because like I said, I think it's one of the best stories. And for anybody who's listening to this, if you come to Alden Park, there's a really cool little kind of a monolith memorial in the park that has a list of all the 21ers that were involved in the story that Jake's going to tell. And Jake's name's on there. So tell me about, like, how did the 21ers come into happening, and how did you get involved?
Well, for a long time, obviously, there had been dissatisfaction with the status quo. The fact that some of the guys had worked here for 15 or 20 years and were outstanding craftspeople, couldn't make supervisors.
Right.
So for at least 20 years before the 60s, there had been real discontent. And several times, guys would try to organize, but in the end, they would fall apart, and nothing would come of it.
Okay.
And if you were, thought to be a troublemaker, you got fired. And there was no doubt about it because it had happened before. But in early '60s, the president, John Kennedy, at the time, formed a committee on discrimination.
Okay.
And when the leaders that we had heard about it, especially Willie Long, heard about it, he thought it's time for us to do something and, fight against the discrimination here. So he started to organize to get African Americans working on the shipyard to file a complaint. And the organizing went on for, I would say, 7 or 8 months.
Okay.
And at the end of that time, we were able to get 21 out of 1,000 to sign the complaint.
What was the hesitation of people to sign the complaint?
Fear of losing a job. It was considered to be a good job.
Right.
If you lost that job, some of the guys had really nowhere else to go. There was no opportunity for us to work in the building trades on the outside because of the discrimination there. And again, if you did work in the building trades outside, you had to be working for yourself or be a laborer. No real opportunity. So that was the main issue, was that if we had been discovered, we would have been fired.
Right.
It would have been difficult to fire the veterans, but the guys who were not veterans, it wouldn't have been difficult. So that there was that fear and the experience of in the past, whenever guys were trying to organize, they got fired.
Wow.
But basically, it was guys didn't want to lose their jobs, and we understood that because guys were married, they had children, and you were taking a real risk. So we'd only get 21 out of the 1,000 originally. That was when we first met to sign the complaint that was going to be filed with the President's Committee on Equal Opportunity. We got 21. Over the next few days before it was actually filed, we got another 4. So we called it the original 21, but there were 25 of us.
I always have to explain that to people. There's 25 people involved, but they're called the 21ers, and it just was a matter of time. Do you think that you all talked to all 1,000 African Americans on the island to try to get them to be a part of it, or did it have to be kind of a secretive thing that was, we trust that guy, we can see if we can bring him into our fold?
It was very secretive.
Okay.
It was so secretive that until probably 20, 25 years ago, most of the families never knew that we were organizing. Only one wife that I was able to find knew that we were organizing. They knew nothing about it. One of the reasons I first decided to write the story was I just wanted to share it with the family members who didn't know anything about it. And then I was encouraged to make it a book and publish it. But it was very secretive. We met at night and we kind of moved the meetings around. We're kind of careful who we talked to because some of the guys we knew were snitches, we call them, and it would go back. So we were very careful about that.
So 7 or 8 months, you all are moving around, discussing this, organizing. How did you get recruited into it? Did they come to you? Did you hear about it?
Well, that's why I said I was fortunate.
Hang on one second. Hey, Yusuf, we're trying to do a recording. How many times you got to go back and forth, do you think?
I just got to collect these two. I'm just collecting all these recycling bins.
Could you wait maybe half an hour?
Yep.
Do you mind? I'll come get you when we're done. Is that all right?
Yep.
Thanks. You just leave it right there. It's fine. It's fine. Thanks, Yusuf. We're just trying to get the recording to appreciate it.
So yeah, it was very difficult, and it was so guys were so concerned that when they would see Willie Long coming, they would start running. Some of them.
Oh, really?
They didn't want to be seen with him.
Okay.
In my case, as I said, I was fortunate to work in the pipe shop. For some reason, there was more activity against discrimination in the pipe shop, as we called it, than any other shop. So of the 25 that finally signed up, 8 were from the pipe shop.
Wow.
And the leadership, Willie Long and John Edmondson and the people, Charles Fluker, the guys who were the real leaders in the beginning, most of them came from Shop 56. And interestingly enough, I knew about it because I worked with some of the guys on a day-to-day basis who were involved.
Okay.
And I was always interested. I personally hadn't been discriminated against because I was still young, just getting started, and no reason to discriminate against me. And they discouraged me from participating because they thought I would lose my job. And they didn't want to see the young guy lose a job.
So they were looking out for you.
Yeah, they thought they were looking out. But I refused not to sign because I could see what was going on around me. And although it didn't affect me then, I was thinking 10 years from now, I'll be in the same position of saying I've been a helper or a limited mechanic for 10 years. I'm doing the same work as the journey people who are white, and we're being paid as helpers, in other words, being paid less.
Right.
So I was determined to sign, and then I really respected all the guys who were involved, the leadership, and I wanted to help.
Wow. So you get recruited into this, you're going to these meetings. What was the actual document itself? Who drafted it? How long was it? How did you guys come to the language that you came to on it?
We had the leadership, Willie Long, who was very dedicated and a very literate guy who could write well, better than most of us.
Okay.
Was part of it. But we had a lawyer who was very active in politics in the East Bay, who became supportive and joined that, if he made anything, it was very little.
Okay.
But he helped to draft it.
And he was not working on the island.
He was an attorney in Berkeley.
Oh, okay. Is he still alive? He's gone.
No, he's been gone for many, many years.
Now, if I understand, are you the last of the 21ers?
Two of us left.
There's two of you left.
Clarence Williams is left. I'm the last left because I was the youngest by far.
Okay.
Which was another reason they discouraged me, because I think the youngest one besides me was probably 7 years older than I was. So Clarence was about 7 years older, and he's still around, but the rest are all gone.
Got it. Just a quick side note, I was at the brewery the other day, and one of the families of one of the 21ers was in there and having some 21ers beer.
Oh, great.
And, they came over and said thanks to us for doing it. And I didn't remember them from the few things we've done, but it was great to have that legacy sort of live on.
Right.
All right, so you write this document and you just send it to the president? What happens next?
We sent it to the president's committee.
Okay.
Which was chaired by Lyndon Johnson. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
Lyndon Johnson.
Well, I don't necessarily remember, but I know of Lyndon Johnson for sure.
Lyndon Johnson, the vice president, was chair of it. And the legal counsel was an African-American guy, so it went there. And it didn't really take off. It was a couple of years before the committee even decided to come out to investigate to see if what we said was true.
Really?
But they notified the leadership here at Mare Island that we had filed a complaint. And so we started having meetings with the leadership here during that period. And there was never any admission of discrimination.
By the leadership of the island? They didn't?
Never. Not at all. Maybe not until today.
Wow, Jake.
What they said was it was a result of misunderstandings. We were just misunderstanding things.
Misunderstanding why there's only two supervisors on the whole island.
Our position was there's no misunderstanding when you can work here for 20 years, as John Edmondson did, and be considered the best pipe fitter out of about 800 pipe fitters, but you can't get a promotion.
Wow.
There's no misunderstanding when the guys have been working here for 15 years and they're helpers and they're making 2/3 of what the journey people are making, but doing the same work. No misunderstanding on our part.
It seems like the facts are the facts.
But the reality is that they knew that there were problems, and we began to make progress fairly fast. Not as fast as we would have liked, and not as fast as the newspaper accounts later would say. But
oh, really?
Yeah, we began to make progress, so that quite a few guys got great promotions, and some of the leadership got promoted to the top in their shops over time. But Willie Long, the leader, never got a real promotion.
Never got promoted.
Yeah, he made him a planner, but he never made it to being a supervisor in Shop 56.
Wow.
I got a promotion pretty fast, relatively speaking, and a lot of guys got very good promotions over the years, but it wasn't overnight. It took quite a while for us to get the results.
And so you send off this letter to the committee. That must have been excruciating, the couple years, waiting to see if you're going to get fired for having done this or whether you're going to get protected or what, or did the committee act right away and say?
The committee, the action that they took that was important for us was hands off.
Okay.
These guys, there can be no retribution to them for this, for filing this complaint. So we didn't have that concern. But the racism was so pervasive that even when guys got to the point that they got promotions to supervisors, some of the white guys refused to work for them.
Really?
Yeah. So it was fairly pervasive.
Yeah. And you stayed on the island until when? How long were you?
I only stayed here about 5 years.
Okay.
There were a lot of reasons that I left. I didn't really like the work. It's dangerous.
Was it dangerous?
Oh, it's dangerous. Working on building submarines is dangerous. And at the very least, your hearing was going to be affected.
Okay.
Because of all the noise. But it was dangerous work, and it was great for me when I was here. Probably one of the best things I've ever done in life for myself and for the community. But I wanted to go to college, and because I had dropped out of high school to join the military when I was 15, and so I kept thinking all along, maybe I'll go back and get an education. And some of the guys in the 21ers encouraged me, Jake, you don't want to stay here because if you stay too long, you're going to get married, you're going to have responsibility, and you won't be able to quit. So go to college. So I took their advice.
That's great. Did you keep up with the 21ers over all those years? Or some of them?
Some of them I did. I was pretty close to Jim Davis, who you may know. I don't think you met.
Don't know who that is.
I was pretty close to him. He was my instructor when I was going through training.
Okay.
And he was maybe 7 or 8 years older.
Okay.
So we were pretty close, and we socialized together. And they had, reunions and events. I didn't go very often because I just wanted to put this behind me. I thought I would never set foot on Mare Island again in a million years.
Yeah.
But later on, they had a reunion of the group, the ones left. By that time, probably only 10 left. And they invited me to come. And they were talking about all the things that had been done and how the story had never been told.
Yep.
And I said, maybe I'll tell the story.
Good.
Well, what happened was one of the guys had a nephew who found out about it and went to Vallejo Times-Herald and said, here's a story that you guys ought to be telling. And that was probably around year 2000. So the story was old.
Okay.
Shipyard had closed. A lot of people had forgotten all about the 21ers. It wasn't any of the books that were written about the closing.
This is amazing.
So the guy at the Vallejo Times-Herald wrote 4 or 5 articles about it, a series, and it became a real story. And people were talking about it. But some of the guys, including Jim Davis, said, this guy's not telling the whole story.
Okay.
So I said, well, I left and went to get an education. I got a master's degree in history. I should be able to write the story.
Where'd you go to school? Here locally somewhere?
San Francisco State University.
San Francisco State. You got a master's in history.
And I'm thinking, well, I read about a lot of great things in history, and this one, I believe, is as important as some of the things I learned in the history book. So
I think it's incredibly important.
I'm unhappy because the families didn't know anything about it. So I said, I'm going to write a pamphlet or something for the family. But a guy at an institution I was involved with said, no, you should write a book. And so that's how the book came about. It took me 10 years to write it. I mean, I was working and, just writing when I was traveling or something. But I got it written. And the thing I'm more proud about, probably than the book, is the monument in the park.
Yeah.
Because it'll be there as long as the other monuments.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make sure that Willie Long was remembered. What happened was one of the guys told me, Jake, you ought to work on getting a memorial stone put in here for Willie Long. And I said, right, but I think it ought to be a memorial stone to everyone with Willie's name at the head of it, but all the 25 guys ought to be listed on it because otherwise they'll be just forgotten to history.
Right. And tell me about the impact of the 21ers, or tell me about how things evolved after that in terms of, and maybe you don't know, I don't know, but in race relations on naval bases, the Civil Rights Act is in there,
the leadership of it, and I was never a leader, by the way. I was just a foot soldier.
Okay.
I was dedicated, I was a foot soldier. The leadership started getting invitations from Hunters Point and Naval Supply in Oakland and around the state and sometimes around the country to come and talk to them, to help them to get organized.
Really?
To fight against discrimination. And so there were lots of complaints. One of the reasons that they didn't get to investigate out here for 2 years is they had complaints coming in from all over the country as a result of what we were doing.
Really?
And by the way, the investigating group that came out found no discrimination.
Really? So it changed things, but nobody ever took accountability.
Nobody ever admitted to discrimination, but things changed, and that's what we wanted. They were always in communication with Willie so that they could find out if there was any retribution against us, and there never was. But there was also never any admission that there was discrimination. But so there was a lot of impact, and the the guy who was head of the committee, the legal advisor to the committee, went around the country taking testimony from other federal institutions or installations about discrimination. So if you look at the language of the Civil Rights Act, some of the language that we use is in there.
Some of the language you used in the 21ers
Complaint.
Complaint?
And some of the things that we complained about and wrote about over the years. We stayed in communication with it. So some of the language is there, and we're pretty sure that, it was a result of what we did, but I can't prove it. I went as far as to go to the library at the University of Michigan, where the legal counsel's papers are kept, went through all the papers. He mentioned that he came here and he talked with people, but there was never anyone said that it was a result of what we did. So people want me to claim it. I don't claim it.
Because that is the claim I had heard. But it sounds like it's a plausible and viable outcome of what
I'm
what
absolutely certain it influenced it.
Yeah.
But I can't prove it. So,
Yeah. Well, that is remarkable. So I'm sorry, I'm a little blown away by this idea that nobody ever admits or takes responsibility for any racism. I mean, I guess you guys are excited that you've activated change, but it had to piss you off still, I would think.
Willie Long died pissed off.
He did?
Oh, yeah, he was a very angry man.
Well,
Very,
had a
very
lot to be
angry.
angry about, I think. in a lot of
He
ways.
had something else to be angry about. Over time, he was a very aggressive guy.
Okay.
Just get at him,
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, his demand was everybody who signed that complaint ought to get a promotion right now.
Okay.
And I'm like, Willie, I've been here less than a year. I don't really think they ought to get a promotion. But he was serious. He wanted everybody who signed that complaint to get a promotion. And that was his approach. So over time, some of the guys thought he was pushing too hard. I mean, the group thought that, the Willie, you got to back off a little bit now. We're getting some progress, and you're still raising hell all the time. And they finally pushed him out.
Really?
Yeah, and that's all. That's in the book. And he quit, and brokenhearted, and moved down to Madeira and opened up a plumbing business and did some real estate investments. But
Okay.
so he was very angry. His wife told me that he was an angry man.
Oh, it's kind of a sad ending to all that.
Yeah, I know from studying history that that's common.
Yeah, not uncommon.
Yeah,
I agree.
the guys who tear down the wall you sometimes don't get the credit.
That's very poignant. So tell me, so we came to you, the brewing company, and I hope it's okay to share this with you. Like, we wanted to do something for Black History Month. Ryan and I, as a couple of, we're kind of the poster child for white guys in some ways. We felt really weird doing something for Black History Month, but we wanted to. And I remember coming in and saying, we'd like to do this beer called the 21ers, but we won't touch this if you're not comfortable with it or whatever. And I remember you saying, I think you kind of said, you might take some flack for this, but your heart's in the right place and I'll back you up and I'm glad you're doing it. And it was really helpful and reassuring for me because from my position, it's just an atrocity to hear the stuff that went on in the past, and I don't really know what to do about it necessarily somewhat. So, we put this beer together and sure had a heck of a good time. You came down and tasted the first one off the line, if I remember right, and we got to do,
pretty good too.
which was good. And then we did a panel with you, and then Brendan Riley, the local reporter, spoke about he spoke about the Irish experience as well as just other minority experiences. And another thing he brought up at that panel that we did, and you told your whole 21er story, was that there is still CC&R's requirements for subdivisions here in Vallejo that have no colored people clauses in them. And of course, they're null and void. They can't be enforced. They're a relic, but they've never been changed. And it floored me. I feel like, for me anyway, like my kids grew up in a Spanish immersion school and Barack Obama was president. And I really think my kids are kind of colorblind to a certain extent, but that doesn't mean that there isn't still a lot of divide and there isn't still a lot of inequality and everything in the world. And for me, I listen back and hear you talk about it, and it's just, I can't imagine how infuriating and just horrible it must have been to be up against that in those early years. So I guess there's a question in here somewhere. I'm curious, how do you see the world today? Like how has it evolved over that time? I mean, you're a well-spoken, well-dressed, college-educated, got your own business man. I mean, you're successful by just about any yardstick you could possibly put out there. Did you see that was a potential path for you back then? Do you feel like the world's changed a lot, or is it still feel like it's broken, I guess, is my question.
First, I want to say that my only reluctance for cooperating with you guys thing was the same thing. I never wanted to take credit for what the 21ers did. I was not a leader, wasn't the best worker in the world. I benefited greatly from working with those guys. And for them telling me, Jake, you don't have an education now, but you can get an education and you can do something other than this.
Right.
And so that was what encouraged me. And there was a lot of opportunity by the time I got to San Francisco State University, there was pretty strong affirmative action programs.
Was there?
Yeah, pretty strong, especially in academia. That, if you showed some smarts, there were a lot of opportunities. So I just took advantage of that. But it never occurred to me that one day that I would be a businessman or anything like that. It's just the opportunities came along and I took advantage of them. But things, probably 20 years ago, I was very enthusiastic about what appeared to be changes. But now, a lot of things have happened over the last 10, 15 years to make me believe that a lot of the discrimination just kind of went underground. And when a guy like Trump, I don't know what your politics are, but when a guy like Trump comes along and basically says racism is all right, then the racists rise up again. And they're rising up again. And so we have some great challenges ahead. I tell my kids and my grandkids, don't take anything for granted, because if you want to know how things can turn and really get bad, read the history of Germany in the 1930s.
Yeah.
It can get pretty nasty pretty fast. And some people that you thought were decent people can get kind of pulled along or dragged along in the nastiness and become nasty. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. Well, but there's no comparison, the opportunities that are at least theoretically there now, they're so different from when I was young that it's hard to believe.
Well, we started this interview with sharecropper or laborer, basically. Those were the only options you had.
Where I was in Arkansas, I'm from the backwoods of Arkansas. And
okay.
There was really no opportunity there.
Well, you've come a long way, Jake.
My daughter told me the other day.
And then talk about your business today, what you do today, because I think it's germane to the conversation.
Well, what I did when I left Maryland was to go get an education. But I always worked when I was going through college.
Okay.
And so what I worked in was programs that were set up to integrate the building trades outside.
Okay.
The building unions, the construction unions. So there were a few programs around that were set up to help African Americans get into the building trades and succeed in the building trades. So I worked in programs like that while I was going to college. And then later on, I had the opportunity to start a business to help not only African Americans in business, in the trades, but in business, contractors. And it kind of evolved, and then I got into what I call labor management relations, which is what I've done for the last 25 or 30 years.
Okay.
And it's all based on the experience that I got working with the 21ers, the experience that I got working on the programs to integrate the trades.
Right.
And then for a brief period of insanity, I was a contractor.
Brief period of insanity. I like that.
It didn't last long. When I started, I looked 10 years younger than my age, and when I finished, I looked 10 years older. It's a hard business. But a combination of all of these led to that I can work in labor management relations, and what I do is the main part of my business is we negotiate what are called project labor agreements,
Yeah, PLAs.
PLAs. You're familiar with them.
I'm familiar with them, yeah.
But for the people who are not familiar with them, it's basically a master a labor agreement that covers large projects, set up so that there's stability, no strikes, no lockouts, no slowdowns, because like the Port of Oakland, they can't stand a lockdown or lockout or slow down or lockout or anything that slows down the progress of the work. And so, and we all, at the same time, we manage the implementation of the PLA. Once they're negotiated, we manage the implementation of it to make sure that both sides do what they said they were going to do.
Yeah.
And also, one innovation was to negotiate language into those agreements that requires the contractors to hire local residents, with the idea that if they're doing work in Oakland, if they're forced to hire local residents, more than likely they're going to hire some African Americans, because that's where the African Americans are.
Got it.
And then the other side is we make sure that workers are paid properly, what they call the prevailing wage.
Yep.
So if you're working on a public works project, they got to get paid a certain wage. We monitor to see if they're doing what they're supposed to do, because my experience is that not all contractors are crooks, but some are. And if you don't watch them, it tends to be crooked. So it was just kind of a natural evolution for me. One thing just led to another, and when the opportunity was there, I took advantage of it.
Well, I think it's a natural evolution. It's also a remarkable evolution from, sharecropping future to, military to serving on Mare, being in Mare Island just as a laborer, to being a part of this group, which seems like it really puts you on it's a theme. It puts you on a trajectory in some ways on this. And I appreciate your humbleness and your modesty about your role with the 21ers, but you are out there telling the tale, and you do a really great job of it, and you really uphold, I think, the spirit of, like I said, I mean, there's a lot of, the most amazing tale never told. You hear that a lot of times in Hollywood and everything else. This is the closest I've ever been to something that when I found out about this, could not believe people didn't know about this. And I knew where that little monument was, but I didn't really know what it meant. Right. So I'm really honored that you took the time to sit down and talk with us and kind of record this. So hopefully somebody in the future can listen to this and we can see where things turn out.
And I want to say this, every time I've gotten into a jam since I left here, I think, what would the 21ers do?
Really?
Yeah. And the answer is always, hang tough.
Hang tough.
Just, fight a good fight and you'll get through it. So that's helped me. The experience of working with those guys is a great experience for me. Well, and I bring it to bear in just about everything I do.
What would the 21ers do? And hang tough. I love it. Well, I think that's an excellent way to end our little interview that we had today. I want to thank you for coming out here on the waterfront. We've had some people walking around and talking. We've had a few boats go by, but I think everybody probably heard what you had to say. And you're welcome anytime at the foundation or the brewery. We love having you around, and it's been a few months, maybe a year since I've seen you, so it's good to see you again.
So I appreciate the opportunity, and the last thing I want to say about the 21ers is that I never was a leader of the group, but I think if I hadn't joined, the story, as much of it has been told, would never have been told without me. So there was a reason for me to join and be with the guys.
You played a critical role. Jake, I want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.